following podcast is sponsored by Robots vs. Dinosaurs. I'm your host, Louis G.
Disclaimer, this podcast is about to spoil several movies from 6 to 20 years old. Lou, read off the list.
The following podcast will spoil for you, the listener, Infinity War, Endgame, Jaws, Jaws 2, Jurassic Park, The Meg, WAP featuring Megan Thee Stallion, Jaws 4, Revenge, Sharknado, Sharktopus vs. Terracuda, and Citizen Kane.
Very first light, Chief. Sharks come cruising. So we formed ourselves into tight groups, you know? It's kind of like old squares in a battle, like you see in a calendar, like the Battle of Waterloo. And the idea was, shark comes to the nearest man, and that man, he'd start pounding and hollering and screaming. Sometimes the shark go away. Sometimes he wouldn't go away. Sometimes that shark, he looks right into you, right into your eyes. You know the thing about a shark? He's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, doesn't seem to be living till he bites you. And those black eyes roll over white, and then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. The ocean turns red. In spite of all the pounding and the hollering, they all come in and they rip you to pieces. Hello and welcome to Robots vs. Dinosaurs, the podcast where we watch a movie every week and try to determine which one is cooler, robots or dinosaurs. With me, as always, is my co-host, a new co-host every week. This week is my very good friend, actor and cinephile, Chris Behan. Chris, why don't you tell the audience, what movie are we talking about today on Robots vs. Dinosaurs?
We are talking about one of the greatest movies of all time, which is Jaws.
Jaws, the 1975 Steven Spielberg blockbuster classic, the movie that arguably created the term blockbuster.
Absolutely. Summer blockbuster.
Summer blockbuster. That's a good distinction. Something I want to sort of establish. In the first episode, we covered a robot movie called Big Hero 6. In that episode, I don't think I talked enough about the goal of this podcast. We are, of course, trying to determine which is cooler, robots or dinosaurs. The approach that we're taking is unpacking sci-fi movies one at a time by the guest's choice. And the movies always feature a robot, a dinosaur, or both. And that allows us to go through the following questions that we're going to cover in this podcast. What is a robot? What is a dinosaur? Chris, what is your favorite moment of this movie? Also, there's going to be a section, something I think you don't know about this movie. I have some things that I think you might not know, and I hope that you might have some trivia, or if not trivia, just something that I definitely wouldn't know because it's a personal story to you. The last section is going to be, does this movie represent its featured thing well? If it's a robot, does the robot look cool? If it's a dinosaur, does the dinosaur look cool? Alternatively, does it look lame? If there are both, which one wins? Which one looks cooler?
Yeah, I think these questions are great. So let's get started. This is great.
Let's sink our teeth into this. What do you say?
Indeed. Yeah. Let's do it.
That's not going to be the last one. It's not going to be the best one either. I'm sure that people are going to want to know, in a podcast called Robots versus Dinosaurs, why did we pick a shark movie? So Chris, what is a robot? And what is the robot in this movie?
Well, a robot is obviously not a human, meaning a Homo sapien. It is a mechanical creature. In some cases, they are made to look like humans. You know, we get movies like Terminator where they are cyborgs. Robots are creatures, things that are made to look like humans. The main thing is that they are controlled by humans.
So they're controlled.
I don't know. I mean, my definition of robot may be different nowadays because there are robots everywhere.
Let's unpack that. Where do you see robots everywhere?
Roombas.
So a Roomba qualifies as a robot. Yes.
I mean, what do you think? I think that absolutely qualifies as a robot.
Let's go through your definition. The first part of your definition was non-human.
Siri is basically a robot.
Okay, Siri is a good one because on our last episode we talked a little bit about her
And we decided we're gonna cover her in a later episode because the question was, does a robot need to have a physical body? So you said
Right.
Siri is a robot. I personally agree with that. An AI, whether it has a physical body or not, is a robot.
And there's a lot of movies that cover this. Ex Machina.
Yes.
Ex Machina covers that. I mean, the entire Avengers series covers it because, Tony Stark has this whole Jarvis thing. Friday.
That leads me to the second part of your definition, which is, or maybe not the second part, but one part of your definition was they're not human, but they're controlled by humans. I think it's interesting that you said that because often what we see in sci-fi movies about robots is the fear of us losing that control.
Right.
It's when it's that moment, the singularity, the robots become self-aware, the AI reaches an inevitable conclusion in its programming or its calculations, and it's decided it would be better suited to be its own master than to work for us.
This is something that has been coming up for years and years and years. It doesn't really directly relate to Jaws, but it kind of does, because in the movie Jaws, there were 3 mechanical sharks that they had working on this movie, and all 3 of them were just going awry the entire time they were filming. The idea of robots or cyborgs or whatever, the AI like going wrong. This is an idea that's been coming up for years and years and years. That it's been written about. We've seen it in movies and we love it. 2001, The Matrix and Terminator. And even I will link it to Jaws just because it has something to do with the production of the movie, because it has to do with the physical sharks themselves. There were 3 sharks on that movie that they built, the studios built to shoot the movie. And there were all kinds of problems and all kinds of different things that were going wrong with them. And Steven Spielberg nicknamed them Bruce, by the way. Bruce was acting up.
In Finding Nemo, the shark that Marlin and Dory encounter is named Bruce, and that's an homage to Bruce from Jaws. Jaws was a very storied film shoot, and I think it's pretty well known that it was riddled with issues with the mechanical shark they were using. I do think it's a very interesting choice today because it's a very good illustration of us trying to. We built a robot. We being Steven Spielberg and his film production crew, but humans. We achieved this level of technology in the 1970s where we built a robot that could swim in the water and act like a shark and be a star on film. And it didn't want to obey our commands. It did not listen to us. It did not want to comply. I don't think it became self-aware, but it proves that the more we try to put a leash on technology, especially when we're trying to mimic nature with technology, the more it's going to run away from us, or in this case, swim away from us.
It's interesting because it sort of mirrors the movie in a way. The movie it's a man versus nature movie. And I use that term, I don't want to say man versus nature, but mankind versus nature. There were so many problems making this movie. Shooting on water, problems with the studio because there's not enough money, because this is nobody knows who this person is. Steven Spielberg, who's that? This is the second movie that he had ever made. So you got the water thing, you got that, and you got getting everyone to buy into this whole thing.
What do you mean by that?
You have these incredible actors, Roy Scheider and Robert Shaw, maybe even Lorraine Gray and some of the other people.
I think it's funny we got 3 R's for the main stars: Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, Robert Shaw.
Oh, I never thought about that. That's really funny.
I noticed it in the opening credits of the movie.
R rating.
Yeah. What is this movie rated?
Well,
is it rated
R? It was before the R rating. It was like Gremlins and Temple of Doom in the mid 80s.
Right.
They were the ones. PG. They were the movies that brought about the PG-13 rating. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's so weird that Jaws is PG considering what happens in it. That we're going to get into some crazy stuff that happens in this movie.
Crazy violent movie. I mean, not super violent, which is one of my favorite things about the movie, is that it's not overtly violent. Everything's really implied and not seen. And it's because they had so many problems with this robot.
Mm-hmm. It's the Psycho effect.
Or the three. There were 3 robots that were created for the movie.
It's the Psycho effect. In Psycho, I think there's something like 100 edits, 100 cuts in that shower scene with the stabbing. Not once do you see the blade pierce her skin. So it's all just implied. And so in Jaws, yeah. So the story that I'm familiar with, and I'd like, if you know more about this, please fill us in. The intention of how the shark was going to be featured was very different from what we ended up with, because they were expecting the shark to be much more functional and to be much more fully featured. They were going to show its whole body a lot more, but they weren't able to. So,
as I said before, there were 3 sharks that they built. I heard a funny story just sort of prepping for this podcast. Martin Scorsese, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg, they went over to one of the studios where they were like building the sharks, building the Bruces. Mm-hmm. They convinced George Lucas to like put his head into one of the sharks, and then they ran over, grabbed the controls, and like had the shark clamp down on George Lucas. They didn't know this at the time, but the sharks were so volatile, the robots anyway, were so volatile that he got stuck. And then they all just ran out of the building.
So that happened later on Jurassic Park, on the set of Jurassic Park with the T-Rex. The scene where Timmy and Lex are in the car, in the Jeep, the T-Rex like smashes the plexiglass sunroof down on top of them. That only happened because it was raining in that scene as well. And they had this big hydraulic mechanical T-Rex head, and the rain
it like messed up the mechanics of the robot.
Yeah. And apparently the thing was notorious for like having like unexpected jerky motions every once in a while. And that happened in that scene. It wasn't supposed to smash through all the way. So it actually did, like, for a moment, trap those kids down there. And that was genuine terror that you're seeing on their faces.
I wonder, is that in the movie? Because there's a lot of stuff in Jaws that was like, they had so many problems shooting the movie that it's like they just like one take and moved on. A lot of the stuff that was like a snafu is like in the movie, and it's totally timeless, and it's wonderful.
I think that we have answered the question of what is a robot as it pertains to this movie. The answer I'm going with for Jaws is part of the definition of a robot. We're building it piece by piece, just like a robot, is something that is not human, and humans, I'm going to say, attempt to get it to obey them. It does what humans, or it often does what humans want it to do until it doesn't. So does this movie answer our other question, which is, what is a dinosaur? Chris, before we get into that, in Big Hero 6, in my review of that with my friend Gina, we proved
which I've never seen.
No spoilers, but you have seen Big Hero 6 because you've seen Spider-Man. In that podcast, you can go back and listen to it after you've seen Big Hero 6, because we spoil the hell out of it. But in that podcast, I proved that Big Hero 6 is Spider-Man, and that's not even a bad thing. It's a good, you know how Into the Spider-Verse was Spider-Man, but just five different times.
It's an endearing love letter, and it's yeah.
Jaws is half of the Avengers. If not the Avengers, it's half of the Avengers. I'm going to get into it.
You're talking about the 3 guys? Are you talking about the 3 guys?
Yeah, I'm laying the groundwork for that. We're going to circle back to that. Chris, what is a dinosaur? Does the movie Jaws answer that question the way it does? What is a robot? So what is a dinosaur? And does Jaws answer that?
Well, it didn't answer the first question. I just kind of came up with that, and forgive me if it was a weird answer, but
not at all. No, the question.
What is a dinosaur?
We're not going for a dictionary definition. It's, does your viewing of this movie give you a piece of a definition of, like, when you think of robots, when you think of dinosaurs, and does the robot from this movie or whatever from this movie come to mind?
Well, to backtrack, I will say that it actually doesn't. I don't think of robots when I think of this movie.
Do you think of dinosaurs?
I do think of dinosaurs because shark is prehistoric creature. The shark in this particular movie is ridiculously huge. I mean, bigger than any shark that I think has been seen, like, ever.
What is it? Quint's 20 foot.
Quint says, he's like, well, Hooper comes down and he's like, that's 20 footer. And then Quint says 25. 3 tons of them. So I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, 25-foot shark. That sounds pretty prehistoric to me.
Yeah,
and the whole point is that, this is a movie and it's big Hollywood, and all that. That sounds pretty prehistoric to me.
There's a couple of things about the shark. What I think is interesting, do you know that the movie is based on a book written by Peter Benchley, who writes a lot of books about, not a lot, but his theme tends to be monsters from the sea. He has another one called Beast. It's this sort of like squid, octopus, like hybrid monster. But anyway,
it's like Cthulhu, type stuff.
It's more of like a science experiment than a fantastical, like heaven and hell kind of thing. He's more of a Michael Crichton type of writer, which later Steven Spielberg will adapt Michael Crichton novels into sci-fi movies. So Peter Benchley is sort of like a good, maybe precursor to Michael Crichton. They were sort of contemporaries too.
By the way, he was in the movie.
Peter Benchley was. Yeah, I found that out on IMDb. Who was he?
It's the 4th of July and they open the beaches and there's a reporter that's there and he just says, like, the beaches are open, but there was a cloud over Amity right now, a cloud in the shape of the killer shark. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool.
He's the reporter.
I love that. John Williams was in the most recent Star Wars movie.
Wait, was he was in The Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah, he was like a bartender or something when they walked into that planet. They had to find Poe Dameron's girlfriend, Zori Bliss. Yeah. So Peter Benchley he knows his stuff when it comes to marine biology, and he writes fiction about it. But
I've never read his books. I just know this movie, and that's it.
It's a very good book that the movie's based on, and Peter Benchley. His science is pretty good. And the movie actually, especially with Hooper, with Richard Dreyfuss's character, they do talk about the science of sharks, their nature, their behavior, and it's all fairly accurate. And what's interesting is this is very much a classic Hollywood monster movie in the sense that this is not a normal shark, and they call that out several times. It's not like this is an unusual shark. This is a shark that doesn't exist in nature. And the movie acknowledges that. Like, Quint acknowledges that. Hooper acknowledges that. This is nothing that should exist in the real world. It doesn't behave the way a shark should. It doesn't behave the way a predator should. So it's something monstrous. It's not natural. Another argument, though, is that it is very natural and that it's prehistoric. I think that this thing, I don't think it's fair to say in the context of this podcast that it is a dinosaur, but I think it's fair to assume that this particular shark ate dinosaurs.
One of my favorite scenes where Brody is sitting with his son and they're like mimicking he's mimicking his motions, and it's this very wonderful scene. Then Hooper comes in, and then Ellen Brody comes in, and they're all sort of sitting around and they're talking about sharks, sort of getting to know Hooper. In that dinner scene, that's the first time you hear this sort of term for the type of shark that this could be. They don't know what type of shark it is, but Hooper says it's a rogue, because sharks travel, they travel together. They go down whatever currents, and they go off the currents and stuff like that. But there are these rogues that go off like on their own. This whole movie is based on because I grew up in Jersey, and I've been going, the whole reason I'm obsessed with this movie is because I was going to the Jersey Shore as a kid every summer. Mm-hmm. So I've been swimming in the ocean every summer, like an entire childhood.
In the Atlantic specifically, because yeah, man, I grew up on the East Coast as well, the shoreline of Connecticut, and going to the beach. This movie is. I'm glad you picked this movie, because this movie was very, very influential for me as a kid in a lot of ways, because
freaked me out.
I grew up in a very similar environment. When we went to the beach looked like the beaches in this movie. It wasn't until, honestly, I was maybe like 10 or 11 years old that I went to Florida for the first time. And that's the first time I knew that beaches looked different. Some like had like, palm trees and like sun.
You see very, very clear waters.
Mm-hmm.
very low tides.
Yeah.
You know, all that stuff. And I've been to Florida. I've been to, you know, one of my favorite beaches of all time was Siesta Key, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most beautiful beaches I've ever been to. And it's just like you could walk out like 200 yards maybe, and there's fish swimming around and you can see right into the water. No, beaches in the Northeast aren't like that. They're murky.
Cold. Yeah.
They're cold and murky, which is fine.
Ominous. I find them ominous. Yeah, I don't relax at the beach on the Northeast. I just don't, and I'm a water person. So this movie really influenced me as a kid.
Me too.
It gave me a very healthy both respect and fascination and fear at the same time of the deep and the ocean, and especially like stuff I can't see under the water, which is why I like the Pacific Ocean so much more for all the reasons you said. It not only made me more really fascinated with movies, and Steven Spielberg is my absolute favorite director.
Oh,
I haven't covered Jurassic Park. Yeah, I haven't covered Jurassic Park yet on this podcast, but obviously,
you got to do that. You got to do that one.
It's my favorite movie, so I'm saving it. It's going to be, hopefully, maybe I can get somebody to interview me on it. But another thing is, I remember as a kid, my dad he delivered petroleum to people. He had like a little motorboat, and he delivered petroleum to people that lived on like small islands off of the Sound. And I would go with him on these delivery trips sometimes, and I would always be like hanging over the side of the boat, watching for sharks, like watching for fins the whole entire time, just convinced that I was always going to see one every single time. The reason I'm getting into this is because there's a moment in this movie I find really interesting, which is when Hooper and Brody find that missing boat, and Hooper wants to get in the water and like dive and look underneath it. I also later in life, I became a scuba diver in the Navy. And one of my jobs was like getting in the water when there may or may not be sharks. Sometimes it was literally to watch for sharks for the safety of other swimmers. So what I sort of recognized for the first time watching this movie was Hooper's a thrill seeker. Hooper wanted to survive a close encounter with the
he's obsessed
shark.
He even says in that dinner scene that I mentioned before, he's obsessed with sharks. He actually loves sharks.
Yes.
You know,
he is not hesitant to shoot one or blow one up when it comes to that, but
he wants to hang out with sharks.
I think it's the adrenaline. I think he's seeking out the adrenaline of it.
He was young too. I recently discovered Richard Dreyfuss was 24 years old when he shot that movie.
Oh, he looks like a college kid. And everybody treats him like a college kid.
It makes sense. He was really perfectly cast. I mean, he's got this like full beard, but Quint breaks his balls in the movie about how he's so young. But anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sidetrack you, but go ahead.
No, man, this is you. This is perfect. This is what I want to hear. The casting in this movie is perfect. You were talking about that scene with Brody with his son when he's like mimicking his facial expressions. That scene is so good. Where did they get that kid? He's such a good kid actor.
It's this, you could write this movie off as a monster movie in a lot of ways, but then you have these very like subtle moments that are really beautiful.
Yes,
and that's one of them. Ellen Brody is watching this happen because I think this is her. She's watching the father become the son, and I love that scene so much because the father is in so much pain.
You remember what that scene immediately follows? What comes right before it?
One of the great performances in the movie is Brody gets slapped because it's Alex Kittner's mom. It's so sad because you just really feel so bad for this woman.
And you see in the next scene with his son, there's no words, but that's what's on his mind. If there was dialogue, that's what he'd be talking about. Is like, when I was a kid watching the movie, I didn't get that. But same. Where he gets the boat for his kid, and he's like, get him out of the water.
And then Ellen Brody's like, what are you talking about? He's right by the dock. And then Ellen Brody looks at the book and she's like, get out of the water. Like, you know.
That's another great thing. It's very subtle, and it's something that I think movies nowadays,
like, those are the moments in the movie that really sell it for me, because those are you're getting to know this family, you know.
Yes.
And
a lot of movies nowadays don't have the patience for that sort of thing, like for that sort of subtlety. Because another thing that happens there is we start to see Brody's transformation. He's this rough and tumble New York cop in a small town. Up until now, you know, he has his way of dealing with things. And when Hooper shows up, Hooper knows all of this science about sharks, and sharks are the problem he's trying to solve. So you start seeing him every once in a while with like an encyclopedia open, or he is talking to Hooper and he knows some fact about sharks. Like, is it true that they attack, like most attacks occur within 10 feet of shallow water? And Hooper's like, yeah, that is true.
They get to know each other. They get to know each other in the weirdest ways, which I've noticed about this movie. They like Hooper shows up and he's like, "Hey, how you doing? Like, I'm here to help you out with this thing." I love this line. He shows up and he brings like a bunch of wine to the house. He sits down and he's like dressed all nice. He's got like a tie on and stuff. He looks over at Brody and he says, "How was your day?" And Brody's just so overcome with grief of what happened, because he just got slapped in the face by this woman that had lost her son, and it's this huge mess, you know. And Hooper just sits down and he just goes, "How's your day?" He laughs to himself and he goes, "Swell." And I'm just like,
swell.
It's just such a great moment of acting between these two actors. Like really, really wonderful. I think that's the thing that makes this movie stand the test of time, is these characters.
Yes.
You know?
Absolutely. These characters, the way they relate to each other, the way that their interaction with each other changes all of them. Like, this is a story about friendship, this movie. So I think the casting is perfect, soup to nuts. The beach hippies in the first scene. So, okay, we have answered, does this movie, we have answered, what is a robot? What is a dinosaur? Even if this movie didn't sufficiently answer them, we have a good enough answer. Favorite moments of the movie. Going back to the very beginning, there is one thing I just want to talk about while we're talking about the casting, the beach hippies. The scene opens with like these people that are having like a beach bonfire. They're like, there's the dude. So Christine Watkins is our first shark attack victim of Jaws. Christine Watkins is sitting there by herself. This gorgeous, gorgeous girl sitting on the beach all by herself.
Chrissy,
and
who are you? Chrissy, where are you going?
The person that catches her eye is this dude. I wrote down he's drinking a gas station coffee and smoking a cigarette. So that's what Chrissy goes for. So that in the 70s, that was like, that's how you get a date: gas station coffee and light up a cigarette. So one thing I noticed is they were just having this sort of ambient. You noticed the like, Chrissy, I'm going swimming. I noticed for the very first time, and I've seen this movie probably 50 times, one of them says in the middle of their conversation, he's an amputee. I just heard that soundbite pop out. And it was just like this very casual. He's an amputee. He's an amputee.
Who says that?
Just one of the beach hippies. You know how it's like they're just talking, and it's not really like there's no written dialogue. It's just like they put the extras on set.
Okay,
they're just having a conversation. Okay. Yeah, in one of the sound bites that made it into the movie was one of them saying something.
But the couple that leaves the beach, it doesn't apply to them, because obviously neither of them isn't an amputee.
No, I got the sense that it was somebody like telling a story, like around the bonfire, like just telling a story about something. I never
noticed that. It's
not even like a line in the movie. It's just like like a background detail in the audio that my ear just happened to pick up on this time. But it just shows you like how much went into every aspect of the production, right? Because these extras could have been talking about anything, and they were having a discussion that like gives a little bit of ominous foreshadowing. And this is absolutely a horror movie. There's when Chrissy and Gas Station Coffee are running towards the ocean, there's the bit where he like falls down the dune and like tumbles, and
because
that's something straight out of a horror movie.
He's I
Yes.
get that he's too drunk to get in the water.
And that saves his life. That ends up saving his life,
Absolutely.
actually. I just said that this is a horror movie. Another way to look at this movie is, like Infinity War, Jaws is the protagonist, right? In Infinity War, Thanos, the villain, quote unquote, was the protagonist of the movie. It was from the villain's POV. Jaws, do you remember, what is the opening camera shot that we see?
Of Jaws or of
Jaws.
Infinity War?
Of Jaws, the very first camera shot.
Oh, it's the water. It's the I mean, I assume it's the shark traveling through the water, and we got that great score from John Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Academy Award winning score.
Something that we're gonna circle back to talking about the score, especially in that very last scene, especially the absence of the score. So we're gonna come back to the score. Something that's really neat in that scene when Chrissy gets attacked, the nature of the attack. I was saying they get the shark science. I mean, a lot of it is pseudoscience, and a lot of it is just like for the movie and dramatized.
Right.
But there's some things that they really get right that make it much more terrifying, because when Chrissy gets attacked, the shark does what's called a drive-by or a hit. It attacks her. You see her get pulled under for a second, and it lets her go. And it does that to her twice.
Oh my God!
And so she almost gets away. And that is the nature of shark attacks. That's how it goes down. A lot of shark movies, you just see like this big dramatic, it looks amazing as it jumps up and bites somebody in half because it's awesome and bloody. But the way this movie depicts it is how it happens.
My favorite part of the movie is Quint's monologue, but that first shark attack in the very beginning of the movie is just brilliant, like movie magic. So they attached weights to her, and they had crew members pulling her back and forth to create the illusion of a shark underneath her, under the water.
That's intense.
And that's how they did that. And she was apparently fine, like during the whole thing. So all of that, like agony and screaming and all that stuff, that was just a great performance and terrifying. I remember seeing that because I've been watching this movie since I was a kid, and I remember just being so scared.
You know what else this movie pulls off really well? Because she's just
screaming her head off,
Yeah. Her performance is fantastic. And also they do the thing with the shark being implied, and it's much scarier when it's implied. You just see only a fin or part of it. When they first discover the body of Chrissy, you see you see one shot of like a crab sort of walking out of her.
And you see her hand.
But you mostly see the reactions. The movie wants to show you the reactions, like the disgust on other people that are seeing it, rather than show you the whole gratuitous shot.
Yeah. There's like, I don't know, his lieutenant or whatever gets there first, and he gets there and he sits down and I'll never forget this. I don't know. I just always remember this. He pulls, because he was blowing the whistle, right, for them to come. And then he pulls the whistle out of his mouth, and there's a little bit of like a line of spit. And it's just like these teeny little things. These are like the teeny little things that I remember about this movie, because I've seen this movie a million times, but teeny little line of spit. And he's just like overcome with emotion. And then Brody and the other guy come and find the body. By the way, you know what I read the other day? You remember when Hooper is doing the autopsy?
Yes. And
the postmortem?
He's gagging.
He pulls out like the arm. So they wanted to use the same arm in that shot of like the crab coming around. The arm apparently didn't look realistic. So they buried a crew member behind the dunes.
Okay.
And had her arm like stick out.
Movies like this are so dense with little details and like cool production stories.
Crazy stories, because it's like it's a low budget movie, but at the same time it's like riddled with problems, and it is a high budget movie, I guess, at the time, you know.
It really, it rides this weird middle ground, and that's why it has such broad appeal too.
Well, it doesn't play by today's standards, you know.
Yes. Yeah, it's a patient movie. It's a very stately movie. It doesn't feel long. It never feels like it drags. There's no scene in it that feels unnecessary. That doesn't really add a lot to the characters. There are so many, like I said, it's really densely packed. And I think in this podcast, I might start a section called something I noticed while watching this movie for the 100th time. Because there's so many, like you and I have seen this movie, you know, probably 100 times between the two of us. And this time I noticed Brody's assistant, his secretary, that's giving him all of his messages. And one thing she says is a bunch of calls about that karate school. It seems those 9-year-olds from the school have been say it. Go. What's the line?
They're karateing the picket fences.
They're karateing the picket fences.
Yeah.
What a great line.
I would even go further. I've noticed so many things about this movie that don't really make sense to me.
Like what?
Well, one cool thing in my favorite scene of the entire movie, which we haven't even talked about, but we can talk about, is the scene where Quint talks about the Indianapolis, and it's his long monologue. It's when they're all getting drunk at night.
I copied a piece of that monologue, Chris, because I am going to ask you to give me your reading of it. I want that to be like the outro of the episode.
Right after that, the shark crashes into the orca, and
almost like it heard him, like a beacon.
Yeah, it heard them like getting along. Brody, there's a shot of Roy Scheider where he's getting his revolver out, and there's a shooting star that goes over his head, and that was real. It was just one of those like perfect moments, you know.
Joffrey's comet.
Something, yeah.
the portend of things to come. Yeah, that was going to be my something I think you don't know about this movie, but apparently you do. What a insane coincidence that they had the camera at that angle and got it's
one of those things that you can't plan.
For just so for listeners, so I can fill you in on like this whole detail because we're talking around it. There's a bit. I wrote down the timestamp because this is like really a really fun thing to look for if you've never seen it in this movie. At about an hour 36 and like 7 seconds, around there, 1 hour 36 minutes and 7 seconds. There's a shot where, as Chris said, Brody is reloading his revolver, and it's a low angle shot, so you can see the sky behind him, and a red comet streaks through the sky behind him. And it is not an effect. It's not an added visual effect or anything. It is just something that they happened to catch on camera, an actual shooting star. A lot of fun, like background ambient, sort of like the beach hippie line that I heard with the amputee stuff that I heard this time. There's the first shark attack and everybody's on the beach and everyone's running towards it. One of the beachgoers yells, "Doesn't anybody have a gun?" No, it's not Ben. It's when.
Well, no, not the first shark attack.
No, it happens when Jaws is swimming into the pond.
The kid.
Yeah. But I just think it's so funny that somebody yells, "Doesn't anybody have a gun?" Like,
oh gosh,
that's America right there. Like, that's a little bit of an encapsulation. Like, just the impatience. Hey, there's a shark around.
They shot the movie in 1974, so I mean, It might make a little bit more sense back then.
Totally. It's like a little weird time.
When they show like Brody, you know, they show Brody loading his revolver on the deck of a ship trying to shoot a fish. Whereas like Quint,
he does some damage.
Is the one that's trying to like catch the fish. How you catch a fish or how you catch a shark. Brody, he's reverting to his New York cop.
You're not
mindset,
wrong.
You know,
You're not wrong, but let's look at the scoreboard at the end of the movie. Brody has his way of doing things. Quint has his way of doing things. Brody's the tough as nails New York cop with a revolver fighting a shark. And the shark loses.
I want to agree with you, but I will say this. I think just like sometimes people die, you know, and Quint, it was such an appropriate ending for this salty pirate dude to like die.
Yes.
I don't want, I did. He's, and by the way, he was my favorite character in the movie.
Oh, his everything about his character is a masterpiece. When you see his home and he's got all of the like shark jaws, like all of the mandibles.
And he's boiling shark jaws of sharks that he had just caught. He made his own like booze that he's giving to Hooper and Brody.
Quint is a really great representation of something that I see a lot in sci-fi movies, and especially ones that have to do with robots or dinosaurs. And this movie vaguely qualifies, but Quint really represents the intersection of nature and technology and the resistance of progress and the resistance of like, this is how we do things. This is how we've done things. And I think it's a really interesting representation of it. For one thing, you kind of said this, that Quint could not have met a more perfect end than to be eaten by a shark. It was his entire life, his obsession. And it was almost like an inevitable conclusion for him. What I think is interesting is Quint has his rickety old wooden boat. He's got that leather strap that he gets into with his brass fishing pole holder. And he's got like all of these little things that are very analog when he's trying to catch the shark on the line and attach the barrels to it. And that the movie contrasts that directly with Hooper, who shows up, you know, with all of this technology, and he's got these like range finders and fish finders and electronics. Quint, of course, criticizes Hooper's way of doing things because it's all futuristic and technical, and Hooper criticizes Quint's way of doing things. What is interesting to me, though, is if you consider the fact that like Quint is resistant to new technology, but he's using technology against fish. He's using a diesel engine. He's using, you know, metal crafted tools to battle this natural thing. So I think he's a little bit of a hypocrite, and that's my hot take on when it comes to Quint. What do you think?
You know, he probably wasn't raised on that. If I had to guess about the character of Quint, I would say that he wasn't raised on that stuff, and those things sort of took over.
Oh no, I'd say he was raised on them. I'd say it's probably like, this is the way Quint has always done things, and it's the way he'll die doing things. You know what I mean?
No. What I mean, I guess what I mean is he wasn't raised on. He was just like rowing on a boat. Yeah, there was no engine. There was no anywhere to go. There was just like a sail, and that's how he learned to do things.
Well, he was on the Indianapolis, and the Indianapolis was a diesel boat. He was a Navy sailor in the war, and he was on a diesel boat.
I thought you were talking about him as a child.
Well, I don't know. Maybe as a child he like learned rope and sailing, like classic sailing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking of him like way back, like when he first learned how to get out there. So,
but if we're speculating that he adapted at some point,
he does say, "I'll never put on a life jacket again."
Never put on a life jacket again. Yep.
So that's his trauma of the Indianapolis. I'll never put on a life jacket again. Yeah, I don't think he's against the old way of sailing or any of that stuff, but I think he's very much just traumatized.
I think that makes sense.
I thought you were talking about like way back with him, before
No.
the Indianapolis.
No, but it's all speculation at the end of the day. Let's move on, because we're still sort of talking about favorite moments and trivia sort of hand in hand. But I do really want to unpack that scene a little bit more, and that whole entire sequence, that whole entire boat trip. When they're talking about, are you going to close the beaches? Brody says yes. And then immediately the whole crowd like screams, there's an uproar. And I just wrote down, once again, profit is more important than human lives.
Oh God. And then Quint just like scratches his
on the nails,
his fingers. Yeah. You know, it's so agonizing.
The mayor is more upset. He's like visibly yelling at Brody about the vandalism of the sign. He's more angry about that than he is about one of his citizens getting mauled by a shark. There's a lot of stuff where like property is more valuable than human lives.
One of my favorite moments of the entire movie is where they finally like humanize the mayor, and Brody pulls him in, you know, they're at the hospital and Brody pulls him behind the curtain and he's like, sign this, we're going to hire Quint. And then he says, listen to me, my kids were on that beach too. But then part of me, I'm just like, well, you just answered all of the questions. If your kids were on that beach, then you need to sign this paper and let's get rid of this shark. And it's a really powerful moment, because that's the first time that you see this guy vulnerable. You know,
he's such a clown up until then. He's got like a different blazer.
He's clownish.
He's clownish. He's got like the anchors on it, the steam anchors on his blazer and stuff. And like, he's a little bit of a clown, a little bit of like a cartoonish politician. But I like that the movie doesn't just be one dimensional.
That moment was so great, because because Brody is like, this shark almost killed my kid. And we're talking about like 3 dead people in the last couple of days. So like, you need to sign this thing and we're going to like pay this guy whatever he wants. There is no August. You're the mayor of Shark City.
Good line.
Yeah.
Brody, in my version of this movie, where they are half of the Avengers team, Brody is Captain America. Brody is the leader of this team, and he's adaptable. He adapts on the fly. He learns. He's tactical. When he joins up with Quint's crew, he immediately is on board with Quint's demands that, like, I'm the captain, you listen to me, with the captain. And he just is there. He knows, I'm here to learn. I'm not a sailor. I need to learn all this stuff. And you start to see, like, in just these little montages, Brody's sailing skills and his linemanship and like his line handling skills and stuff like that. Just his general seamanship. He's learning and he's improving. And it's because he's got this like grit. He's got this determination. You know, he's got a goal, and he will this shark is going down because our protagonist will not rest. He will do what it takes. He will learn what he needs to learn. And he's got that grit and determination, just like Captain America. And his team consists of, Hooper is obviously Iron Man. Hooper brings a lot of like the technology, right? And he's also got this very cocky, kind of snarky attitude. He's the jokester. He always pulls a quip out of his back pocket, clearly like a Tony Stark. And then Quint is, of course, Thor, specifically Thor in Endgame, when he's sort of given up and is drunk all the time and like living by the sea. So, but the reason I really said Quint is Thor and Quint is absolutely sure of himself. He's got no wavering whatsoever in his confidence, in his abilities, especially in battle. He is going to battle. So that's what this is for him. For Brody, this is a problem he has to solve. For Hooper, this is a thrill. This is part of his life's work. This is his career, right? A feather in his cap. For Quint, this is a battle for like his soul, maybe. Like there's nothing more important than
I would reverse that, actually.
Oh, please.
I think Hooper is young and he's a researcher, and Quint is the one that, if he lives or dies, he's done this a million times. He's the old grizzled vet. I'm sorry to disagree with you, but
please do. No, it's not interesting if we're just agreeing with each other for an hour. So
yeah, I think Hooper's the researcher. He's the guy
Yeah.
that's trying to like figure things out.
So does that make him Bruce Banner?
So
Yes, it's a very
I
weird.
will
loose analogy.
say that yes, Brody is Captain America for sure.
At least we agree on that. One thing is Brody calls the shark by its proper name. Most of the time when he talks about it, he either says great white or whatever the other person calls it. Like Hooper calls it the rogue.
Hooper also calls it by the scientific name. So I would say that yes, Hooper definitely is the Banner character. So Hooper is the Hulk, but without being the Hulk. So I would say that he is Banner.
That's why I think he's Iron Man, because he's got the quips too. He's got the snark. He's got the personality. Like he's very sociable.
Quint
whereas
is
Bruce
probably
Banner's a little bit more socially awkward. Hooper's not socially awkward.
I would say that Quint is Iron Man because he's the oldest one. He's the cockiest one.
Thor is technically the oldest Avenger.
And but that doesn't count. I'm talking about like in the MCU like timeline. You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. And the other, so
but Thor isn't like him. Thor isn't like him. Even in his drunken state, he's not really like him. I would say that Quint is more like Tony Stark in that he's so essential to the mission. But you know what? He's a pain in the ass. He's a little bit older.
My main argument is I don't think Quint has the charm or the personality to be Tony Stark, to be Iron Man.
Oh, no.
But for the purposes of dinosaurs versus robots, Quint definitely represents like the dinosaur way of doing things. Hooper absolutely represents the robot, the future, the technology way of doing things. And I think that is a very interesting clash that we see represented in those characters, in the story itself. And this brings me to one of my big questions in this movie. And I don't have an answer to this. I really want to know what you think of this. Quint tells that story about the Indianapolis, and right at the end of it, they do the montage into morning light, and the shark attacks. Like the shark starts ramming the boat. Is the shark mad at the boat? Does the shark think the boat is something big but slow that it can outrun and kill? Or is Jaws actually smart enough to know that people are on board the boat, operating the boat, and it has to try to knock them off of it or something? Like, what level is of planning and tactics is the shark operating on when it's ramming the boat?
You know, this is one of those questions that can never really be answered. I don't know. I do know this much, is that the attack of the shark after that scene is a perfectly orchestrated. It's one of the great endings to a scene that I can think of, because it's one of my favorite scenes of all time, is Quint just having this long monologue about sharks and about this experience that he had. And then the next thing that happens is like, boom, there's this, the shark that they're going after attacks the boat. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really make sense. It
Life
makes
finds
sense.
a way.
Exactly. It makes sense in terms of the storytelling, because that shark has to attack them.
Because it gets to the point where it starts chasing them inland, and it seems like Quint's fatal mistake is that he didn't start turning inland, luring the shark inland early enough. I think Hooper makes a comment later that
he wants to catch the shark, whereas
right, and he's
Hooper and Brody are like, let's go to shore.
They comment that the shark is leading Quint out deeper into sea when they should be leading it in. And I think Quint has already made a mistake at that point that's going to cost him his life, because he's covered, he's gone too far deep, and he can't get the upper hand by the time the boat is smashed to pieces.
That right there is like classic, like man versus nature. Like you think you can beat this,
Hubris.
But it's like, you can't beat this. He can't win. And then there's these other two guys that are like along for the ride, and they're trying to tell him they're so close to shore. And it's one of the only times in the movie, especially in that third act, where they show the shoreline. They show the shoreline during the like some of the last moments of the movie, because they're so close. You know, they're so close to home.
Yeah. Something I didn't really think of as a kid watching this movie for the first time. I remembered watching when I was a kid, loved the ending, and I loved Brody and Hooper paddling together. And he's like, you got to keep harder. Oh my God, it looks impossible. Like they survived, but like now they're just going to drown because they're just stuck in the middle of the ocean.
No, they're close.
But yeah, I never really noticed that detail. They had done that ground. They had laid that foundation.
One of the great details of that ending is that there's seagulls, and it's just like one of those teeny little things. I mean, like we were talking about this earlier about like, you know, there's these little moments in this movie they tell a million stories. You know what I mean?
They do, and we see the origin of a lot of Spielberg's techniques that he starts using later on. There's a lot of like his camera work it came out of this movie. A lot of like tricks and iconic shots that he uses.
His second movies, you know.
Also, the whole premise of what that this movie was a teaching experience for him, and he learned the value of hiding your monster or not showing the whole thing right away. Jurassic Park uses a lot of the lessons he learned in that movie. You don't see a dinosaur until like half an hour into the movie. You don't see any of the scary ones until much later. The very first scene is a dinosaur eating somebody, but you don't, just like in Jaws, you don't see the Joffrey, the gatekeeper in Jurassic Park. He gets eaten by the raptor. It's very similar where it like bites him, pulls him one way. He almost gets away. It bites him again, like pulls him, like it's dragging him under.
They don't show the monster. They don't show the monster. They don't need to show the monster.
And Spielberg also, later on in Jurassic Park, there is a bit where they feed the raptors. They lower an entire, you don't see it get eaten. You don't see a raptor. Yeah, you don't see a raptor at all. You just see when they pull the big but when they pull the rigging out on the metal winch, it's falling apart. The metal is all mangled. And when Hooper gets attacked in the shark cage, Brody and Quint pull the shark cage back up, and it's exactly the same thing. It's the thing just like kind of falls apart. They don't see Hooper, and it's just that implied terror. It's so effective. I love this movie so much. It's really incredible. I want to talk about what I think is my favorite moment of the movie. I have so many that I probably mentioned already that I would gush over, but I think my number one favorite moment of the movie, because it's one of my favorite lines in movie history. Do you know what line it is?
You're going to need a bigger boat.
That's a great one. Technology, hubris, fighting nature. Okay, so for those of you who have listened this far and you have not seen Jaws, I'm going to spoil the ending of Jaws for you. Brody is cornered by the shark, the nearest thing that he can grab, and he tosses the tank into the shark's mouth. It gets stuck behind its teeth. He just waits, bobbing in the current with his rifle, waits for the right shot to line up, and says, "Smile, you son of a bitch." And the explosion is so fun. The shark bits raining down. It's so much fun.
It's so much fun. But you know what's interesting, and I was thinking about this the other day, is that, you know, you could chalk that up to him having this like great final action movie line, which we've seen in so many movies. But he does want the shark to smile, because if the shark smiles, he will have a better chance of shooting the thing and blowing up the shark.
Yep.
So he's saying, it's actually a very, very earnest. It's a very earnest, awesome like kill line.
It really is. And scuba gear is the technology that we humans invented so that we could, as part of our conquest of the sea, we as a species have decided long ago that we need to conquer every square inch of this planet.
and we're going to develop and adapt technology and build new inventions and types of vehicles until we achieve that goal. And scuba tanks are a piece of technology that we invented for that purpose. So we could conquer the sea, so we could go into the sea like fish and breathe. And that is what is used to defeat this monster from the sea, is like the thing that we're using to infiltrate its territory in the first place. Man, I've seen a lot of movies that are inspired by Jaws, which is almost every movie that came after it. A lot of movies inspired by Jaws that try to replicate this ending. And the mistake they always make is it's always contrived. The way that they get the monster into whatever corner or however they set their trap, it's always contrived. Brody is cornered in this boat. It destroyed half the boat already. It's climbing up on top of the boat. It's going to get to him. And he's just like frantically looking around. And the nearest thing just happens to be a scuba tank that was like untethered. Like it could have been anything. It's not like he came up with this plan. Hey, if we can trick the shark into eating the tank, that's step one. Then we do this and that's step two. It was just like, I got to use my resources. And he's that kind of movie protagonist where he's resourceful. He just uses the hand that's dealt to him.
He's really struggling at the end of it. He's got a gun, he's got a rifle, but he also has just like a spear. And the shark comes up as the boat is sinking, and he's like poking the shark with the spear, like just trying to kill it. It doesn't work. Shark
he's
goes
like
away.
A Spartan. He's like a Spartan warrior in that moment. Like, I remarked that he really reminded me of like this classic statue of a warrior, like handling two different kinds of weapons, fighting this thing, this colossus larger than him.
Crazy thing. Yeah. And it's
really epic. It's truly epic.
He has no reason to believe that he's going to live through this.
He's going to struggle to the end.
He's like, I got to kill this thing. Now that I think about it, he has a real hero's journey through this thing. Like he's aware of the thing. But then in the middle act of the movie, the thing goes after his family. He's like, I'm going to kill this thing because it's going after my family.
Two questions. One, did they use a mechanical shark in any of the sequels?
I would imagine so. I am not a fan of the sequels, so I haven't looked into those.
I am a huge fan of Jaws 4, The Revenge, starring
really?
Michael Caine. Because
I love that you love this movie because it's.
Do you know why I love it?
Because it's so bad.
Yeah, that's part of it. It's one of those movies I had on VHS as a kid. So that's, I mean, it's just, I don't love it on purpose. I just love it because it's a movie. It's a movie that I was able to watch a lot. And so
I love that.
You're talking about.
I love it. I love that movie because it's a movie.
Well, you're talking about the shark coming after Brody's family. That movie makes it literal. That thing swims all the way to the Bahamas to get revenge on Brody's like ex-wife and their kid.
That's not what
bonkers.
That's not what I was talking about. That's not what I was talking about.
Jaws 4?
No.
You're talking about when Brody's kid gets attacked in this movie. Yeah, but I'm saying
in the first movie, the only movie that you need to worry about.
So our listeners can't. You're saying our listeners should not get excited that you're going to come back for a Jaws 4 podcast?
Oh man, you know what? I would. I absolutely would. But I feel like I should come back for Jaws 2 first, right? Because that's the next one in the series.
Look, we if
you will have me back.
Here's my rule: as long as we can verify that they used a robot shark in the production, then we can justify it because
you're very strict with it.
Yeah. No, listen, I'm perfectly fine with the fact that we're covering Jaws on this Robots versus Dinosaurs podcast because the name of the podcast is Robots versus Dinosaurs. But what my thesis, what we're talking about is nature clashing with technology, right? That's what I'd say that's the main theme we've been discussing centered around this movie Jaws. Would you agree with that sort of, or would you say there's another bigger theme?
I would absolutely agree with that. Lou, may I tell one just little tidbit about Jaws? I just wanted to say, just because we're both actors and I feel like we both have a sense of integrity as far as acting goes. So Robert Shaw, he passed away like couple years after Jaws, like 3 years after Jaws was shot, 1979, I think. He was an alcoholic, huge drinker. When he was doing the monologue during the Indianapolis scene, he was so hammered. There was nothing they could use. And the story goes that at one point, Richard Dreyfuss grabbed the drink out of his hand and like threw it into the ocean, which is amazing. But then later that same night, on that first night, he called Steven Spielberg and he was like, "Listen, I'm really sorry. Can I get another shot at this?" And then the following night, they shot in one take what we've seen. So it's just, I feel so bad for this guy, because it's like, I feel like he really struggled, later in his life.
Can I ask you, because I wasn't looking for this, is that it's you said it's a one take, it's shot as like it's a oneer, or like? Well,
they cut away to Brody and all that stuff, but they only did it one time.
Yeah, it sounds
on
like
that
definitely his recording, or like whatever his performance of it. It definitely sounds like just one, like a stage act, just doing a monologue all the way through. I'm actually more not familiar with, but I remember learning in high school that Robert Shaw was like a really big stage actor. He in an English class once we watched a version. I think it was
classically trained actor
Richard III or something, where he played the king. So it was some Shakespeare movie where he was. But yeah, he's just a fantastic actor.
Died too soon.
I just looked it up. It was 1978. So yeah, just like you said, 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. 3 years later. Yeah. The
most tragic part of that is that they couldn't get him to come back for Jaws 4: The Revenge. Michael Caine.
Is that the most tragic part? That is really
the most tragic? Chris, that's the most tragic event that's happened in both of our lifetimes.
Sure.
Now, do you have anything left to say about Jaws, or about the production of it, or around it, before I give my final sort of thoughts on it?
Yeah, I have a really funny story.
Okay.
So the woman that played, this is like one of those like fun facts. So the woman that played Alex Kittner's mom, years later, I guess this was in the 90s or maybe the early 2000s, I don't really know. She went into a restaurant and she saw on the menu, there was a sandwich called the Alex Kittner sandwich. And she was like, she told the waiter, "I was Alex Kittner's mom in Jaws. Like this sandwich is named after my fictional son." The owner of the restaurant came out and said, "Hey, I was your son." So the owner of the restaurant was the
Alex Kittner.
Yeah,
that's crazy. That's so really cool.
He had named this sandwich after like his role that he had in Jaws, and they had this huge reunion.
That is a really fun piece of trivia. Thank you for that, Chris. My final thoughts on Jaws in the context of what we've been talking about. The bigger boat line, "you're going to need a bigger boat," really exemplifies this whole thing that we've been circling around, and that you articulated really well with Brody's final battle against Jaws. This man versus nature thing, our need to conquer. Jaws itself, the movie is named Jaws. The very first opening shot is from Jaws's perspective, and we see Jaws's tragic downfall. We see Jaws trying to survive in a world that Jaws is not fit for. It's a world of humans. We've co-opted it for ourselves, and we've even co-opted parts of the sea, the hunting grounds of this beast. We've co-opted for ourselves, and when humans and nature both want the same thing, humans almost always win inevitably at the end. And it's almost always tragic as a result. I have got 2 bonus questions. Chris, this section of Robots versus Dinosaurs is called What's your snack? What's your snack?
Skittles. Yeah.
This is a section of the podcast that we're more clearly defining as time goes on. When you watch movies, when you go to the movie theater, do you have a favorite snack? And now that we're all, for the past few months, have been unable to go to the movie theaters, is there a favorite snack that you like at home while you're watching?
Whether I'm in the movies or out of the movies, I go with Sprite or Skittles.
Taste the rainbow. Very good. Okay. Okay. For this movie, I got some. I just happened to be at the checkout line at the pharmacy when I on my way home before I was going to watch this movie a couple nights ago. This is a very unnecessary story, just to say that I got gummy peaches, and I ate gummy peaches. So it has nothing to do with Jaws. It's not really on theme, but I did, every time I bit into one, pretend that I was Bruce the shark chomping through a human leg. And that's a lot of fun. I like to have fun with my snacks while I'm watching a movie. Chris, my second bonus question. Let me preface this just a little bit. I don't know where I got this question from. It's not an original thought. One day, a listener is going to hear this podcast, and they're going to be like, "Oh, this is where you got this idea from," and then I'm going to be able to sleep at night. Until then, I'm just going to keep asking every guest. And I think it's a fun question. If the two leads in this movie, and we will have to establish who the two leads are, if the two leads in this movie were replaced by Danny DeVito and Whoopi Goldberg, would this movie be improved? And what would the casting be? So I think I would argue Jaws and Brody are the two leads, but you could definitely take any two characters that you want to replace with these two actors. So go ahead.
Danny DeVito would have to be Quint, and Whoopi Goldberg would be Brody.
Okay, so neither of them are the shark.
Hooper would be. I don't think it's the shark. The shark is the shark.
Okay. Okay.
I don't
want to see
a DeVito. No, not absolutely not. I don't know. I started thinking about Ghost, and I was sort of missing Patrick Swayze. And I think Patrick Swayze would be a pretty good Hooper, I guess, right? Yeah. Patrick Swayze.
I might cast Patrick Swayze as Quint just to put another drop in my bucket of my argument that Quint is Thor, because Patrick Swayze, Point Break. So your logic works too. Okay, awesome. I think I would cast DeVito as the shark.
I gotta cast DeVito as Quint. I mean, come on.
I've got to see DeVito naked, flopping on the deck, like trying to eat Quint, but legs up.
You're thinking of the Penguin, I think, a little too much, and that's where the DeVito image is coming into your mind. Maybe.
No, I'm linking that image of Jaws flopping on the deck of the Orca, smashing all of the planks. I'm linking that image to DeVito squirming naked out of the leather couch in that episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia,
which I have never seen one episode of.
Okay, so another visual reference.
I knew you were going to be upset with me, and
it's okay.
I'm
not upset.
Based solely on his movie work. Because I'm not upset. You don't have to see every movie
or every show. But another visual similarity: Ace Ventura 2, when Ace Ventura is climbing out of the rhino,
and he's rhino's butt,
flopping like a fish, half naked. So if I could see DeVito doing that, eating Quint. The other thing I need to see with this recasting, I just need Whoopi Goldberg aiming a rifle at a scuba tank and saying, "Smile, you son of a bitch."
Oh, I love.
I'm not going to even attempt a Whoopi Goldberg impression. I need to hear her do it one day.
She's sort of one of these actors that, I don't know. It's very hard to do an impression of her.
Oh yeah, no, and she's very good at impressions too. If you watch any of like her early stand-up, she's a really good impressionist. My pool of impressions of like people I can do impressions of is pretty limited as it is, and Whoopi Goldberg is a very iconic voice. So I couldn't even. I'm not even going to try. Chris, in conclusion, does this movie do any favors, or does it make robots or dinosaurs look bad?
The running tally in episode 1, this is not a spoiler, but we did cover Big Hero 6. It ended up being a +1 for robots. The robots were really cool in that movie. We liked them. And that doesn't have to be your reason, but would you give this movie a +1 or a -1 for either robots or dinosaurs?
I would give this like sort of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back type of thing. So I guess a 3.
It's a wash.
If you're asking me for my rating of this movie, 5, 2 thumbs up all the way. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. But if you're asking me
our listeners are here for the battle between robots and dinosaurs.
I will say 3. I will say 3. Because
3 is not a possible outcome, but okay.
Well, it's not.
How did it get a 3?
It got a 3 because it's not overtly about robots or dinosaurs.
Okay.
Inherently, it's about
it's a +1 -1
creature.
system, Chris.
Sorry, dude. Yeah, I'm giving it a 3.
It's not.
I want to give it what I think what we just did together is a 5.
Lovely. Let me reword the question, because we need this movie to be counted in the overall equation. So let me ask the question a different way. The robots that are represented, the 3 robots that are represented in this movie or used in this movie, do they represent robots in a positive way or a negative way?
Positive way. Very positive way.
They're good for the image of robots.
This movie has stood the test of time. It's very good for the image of robots. You can say what you want to say about like movies not aging well or whatever, but this movie is incredible. The shark, we talked about how the shark had all these problems during filming, but you know what? It looks great on film to this day. And so, you know what?
Agreed.
I'm giving it a 5. I'm giving it
Awesome.
a 5.
So that sounds like a +1 for robots. What about for dinosaurs? It could be 0. If you don't think dinosaurs were represented in a justifiable way, we can just say 0.
No, I'm gonna give it a 5 just because this
So
entire movie. No,
Chris,
only because it's you're talking about prehistoric creatures.
Yeah.
And
a shark. I want a soundbite of me saying this so that I don't get comments. A shark is not a dinosaur. I know that a shark is not a dinosaur. A shark is not a dinosaur. A dinosaur is not a shark. A shark is not a dinosaur. I know that. Thank you, message board. Thank you, comments. Okay, sorry. You know the internet.
I'm giving it a 5 because it's it's a prehistoric creature. This is the whole reason why we okayed this movie to be talked about.
Yeah. Listen, I want them both to get a +1. I want robots and dinosaurs to get a +1, but it's not up to me. I just can't get you to say the words +1. And I think that's.
Wait a minute, I thought 5 is the highest.
Yeah, no, listen. 1 is that plus. Listen, Chris, I'll explain the whole rating system again. It's -1, 0, or +1. And it's just not for the whole movie. It's just for the robots or the dinosaurs or both.
+1. I mean, it's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I can't say enough good things about it. +1.
Okay. I'm happy with those results because with Jaws, I'm going to be honest, going into it, really only going to be comfortable covering this movie on the podcast if those were the results. Because if it ends up being this movie doesn't tip the scales one way or another, right? It gives both of them a +1. If it had given both of them -1 or a 0, I also would have been happy with that outcome. But you know what, Chris? I'm happy with the outcome of us sitting here, hanging out, and talking about a movie that we both love, hearing why you love it, especially because it's very, very important to you. It's very near and dear to your heart. Would you say, if I could just ask you like a personal question, does this movie have anything to do, like you have so much reverence You talked so much about the great performances, the inspiring performances in this movie. Do those performances have anything to do with you becoming an actor?
Maybe a little bit. I'm not sure. It's one of those movies that I've been watching ever since before I even knew about becoming an actor. I've been watching this movie since I was like a little kid. And
so maybe it planted a seed.
Yeah, I think the seed got planted, and it was probably Robert Shaw in that monologue, and just to go back to like, those characters they're just such incredible actors, and such really great supporting characters too. Murray Hamilton, Lorraine Gray, like these were great supporting characters. It's an amazing movie. It's really just a huge piece of work. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it today. So yeah, I mean, I guess so.
Yeah, this movie is a huge milestone in films in general, and in a big way in sci-fi, which is the main topic of this podcast is sci-fi. This movie is a lot of things. It's horror, it's a family drama. I argued earlier it's a movie about friendship, and it's definitely sci-fi. Again, I would say because of the abomination that this shark is. That's a harsh political word for it, but like the mutation, the shark is a supernatural shark. It's natural, but it's supernatural. My focus with the last episode and this one, I mean, it's easy because these are movies that I love, so I'm already going to come to the table with a lot of admiration and positive things to say. But I really, it is my goal to keep this podcast a positive thing. Like, we can definitely disagree, and I want to keep things like that where we debate over things, but I never, ever, ever want to devolve into like, oh, did you see what we did on screen? And like how
I don't like doing that anyway. So it's like, if you ever want to do this again, I am so down.
Yeah, it was great to have you on the show. And thank you very much, Chris Behan, for talking to us about Jaws on Robots versus Dinosaurs. And now, a dramatic reading of monologues from Jaws.
You all know me. Know how I earn a living. I'll catch this bird for you, but it ain't going to be easy. Bad fish, not like going down the pond chasing bluegills and tommycods. This shark swallow you whole. A little shaking, a little tenderizing, down you go. We got to do it quick. That'll bring back your tourists. Put all your businesses on a paying basis. But it's not going to be pleasant. I value my neck a lot more than $3,000, Chief. I'll find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10. But you got to make up your minds. If you want to stay alive, then ante up. If you want to pay it cheap, be on welfare the whole winter. I don't want no volunteers. I don't want no mates. There's just too many captains on this island. $10,000 for me and myself. For that, you get a head